The World Trade Center 9/11 incident was not a result of blowback, and henceforth was not even a terrorist attack. Now, why do I think that? Well, I watched a large portion of that incident live the day it happened. I started watching it approximately 15 to 20 minutes after the first plane struck. And I continued watching and listening. It was on CNN. I continued watching and listening until late that evening. Up in, being it was New York, it was, getting dark and everything. I even saw some of the live footage that they were showing at, Ground Zero. But anybody with, a basic understanding of engineering, physics and building structure, something which I have, the very first thing that I thought was most striking was the fashion that the buildings came down. Never in the history of steel frame structured buildings like that has fire ever brought down a building. And never in that fashion that we all witnessed on the day of 9/11. Now, prior to 9/11, I had previously watched numerous shows on the Discovery Channel, PBS, and various other educational channels of how buildings are rigged for demolition. And what I saw on that day of 9/11 was exactly the same thing I saw before, with some slight variances. I am also very familiar, familiar with thermite. I actually experimented with it when I was younger. Iron rust, aluminum, and you need a pretty strong energy source to get the reaction going. And that's basically what, a crude form of thermite, very basic and simple. And with the right mixtures of, like I said, rust and aluminum powder, I mean, say 2 cups of that compound mixed together, and with the adequate firing energy to start it off, will eat through a engine block in a matter of a few minutes. I mean, that's just the crude stuff. Now there's some other stuff that I've also researched, which is called nanothermite. And that's basically a very scientifically developed form of thermite that's designed for a more intense thermolytic reaction. And that is what brought the World Trade Center buildings down. Not jet fuel, okay? Jet fuel only burns at approximately 1400 to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is not enough to melt steel, okay? And nanothermite is widely used in the military. It's also used in very specific industries. The railroad uses it to weld tracks together. And here is basically a very well thought out theory of mine. And you also got to remember about building number 7 that wasn't even struck by a plane, and it collapsed at free fall speed into its own footprint. Now, the first 2 buildings were slightly different than building 7, and were basically your run-of-the-mill average rig demolition. But I saw the molten pools. I saw the molten metal, and I am convinced, without any shadow of a doubt, that nanothermite was used to bring down the World Trade Center buildings, with the exception of building, well, yeah, no exceptions actually. So, a good guess is that there was some secret rigging going on in the building. Plus, there was also probably had containers of nanothermite throughout the building, just sitting in storage rooms or what have you. And there's also a very, very good possibility that the aircraft themselves had decent amounts of nanothermite stored on them. Okay, now the planes, the aircraft themselves, could have very likely have been, and I think I'm more inclined to think that they were surplus and or retired military or even possibly commercial aircraft, remote controlled. Yes, they do that, okay? The military expends countless hours training people in the use of remote controlled aircraft, drones, just like today, as before mentioned, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard it over the news about the remote control drone aircraft. Basically the same principle, and it's just like flying one of these remote controlled hobby airplanes that you might find occasionally. Hobbyists do it. Basically the same thing. And like I said, there are military personnel who expend lots of hours training to do things like that. So, which casts this, all this casts serious doubts on the whole theory of blowback that Mr. Ron Paul continually throws out there. So, anyway, and it's almost dumbfounding. 9/11 happened over over 10 years ago, and there's still people thinking that it's a terrorist attack. You know, there's been plenty of research done on the matter. It's all over the internet. It's in your public library. But you know, a lot of citizens of the United States just really don't care to research the matter. They just take it upon faith that their government leaders or their administration leaders are telling them the truth. And then Ron Paul comes along and makes this claim of blowback, and people find that a little bit more probable. Well, I'm sorry. It doesn't. It just does not add up. Okay? The whole 9/11 World Trade Center incident was a military-industrial complex false flag operation made to look like a terrorist attack. Plain and simple.